Virus is never a fun word to hear. In relation to computing, it bears a negative meaning in the form of corrupt files and destructive malware. When in relation to diseases and healthcare, it has a more destructive narrative. Illness spreads like wildfire, the economy crashes, and worst of all, there's a rise in death counts. Given the most recent pandemic that's sweeping our planet, it got me thinking about how much worse it could be. Video games have concocted some of the worst viruses over the years, and in this video we will look at just that. Hey guys, welcome to Hypotheticals, the show that brings you the unquestionable and questions it in relation to gaming. And today we'll be looking at viruses in video games as we try to compare them to one another and try analyse how well our planet could combat such awful epidemics. So let's put our lab coats on as we examine these dangerous diseases and see how they perform in the real world. Before we begin, I think it's important to point out that several viruses on this list have the same effect as one another. So in this video, viruses will be categorised as follows: rodent spread, gene mutation, zombie, and fatal. Rodent spread. Similar to current events, the cause for this type of disease starts with animals, specifically rodents, and travels to a new host, humans, and attempts to alter one's well-being. In Dishonored, the rat plague is a good example. A rat-borne disease causing lung and brain disease over time. Blood would soon drip from the victim's eyes and eventually death would follow. At the time of its discovery, there was no cure and the consequences were dire. A 1,000-to-1 survival rate when contracted. Two similar rodent diseases from The Sims are called guinea pig disease and rabbit rodent fever. Both are very similar to rat plague. Both are fatal when in contact with rodent bites, or the infected in general, and can lead to death. I think rat plague would be handled swiftly in the real world. I base this hypothesis off its similarities to its real world alternate, the bubonic plague, where scientists would later discover it was the fleas causing the contamination, and not the rats specifically. The same is true for the Sims rodent viruses. Nowadays, there is plenty of treatment for animal bites in general, and the spread of such disease is therefore minimalised because of this. Gene mutation. This disease deals with the altering of DNA in humans or other living organisms. It can be spread through contact with gases and liquids, and oftentimes direct contact with the infected. While gene mutation can be fatal, it can also leave victims alive with destructive results to their body and mind. Take Fallout for example. The forced evolutionary virus was responsible for the creation of super mutants as well as individual experiments such as the Master or Harold the Tree. Imagine living life as a tree rooted to the ground because of a virus. Suddenly, the rodent bites don't sound too bad. It would appear the FEV is also irreversible for the most part. A bioweapon threat of FEV radiation would be enough to kill our entire planet, or see it turn into a mutated mess. Despite this chance existing, it's not going to be creating super mutants anytime soon. The only thing high levels of worldwide radiation would do is cause nationwide genocide. I don't believe everyone would die, but it would seriously underpopulate most countries. In terms of our healthcare departments, let's take America as a leading example. They are the largest spenders in healthcare than any other country, with $3.5 trillion per year as its last recorded expenditure. Imagine all this money going to waste trying to reverse the unthinkable biohazards of radiation effects. It would likely be a waste of time in retrospect. Chernobyl is a leading real-life example, which caused such devastation to lives in a much smaller radius by comparison. 800,000 people were diagnosed with radiation. However, there were only 50 deaths at the time, with an estimated 4,000 more possible deaths undocumented. The same could be true for the genophage virus spread in the video game Mass Effect. This bioweapon is similar to Fallout's FEV, but with the airborne virus infecting its hosts, specifically in pregnancies, to disallow repopulating the planet and eventually killing it off. Personally, I can't see a cure for such disasters, but I would imagine quarantining would be put in place for eventual cures for such a pandemic, with specialised reproduction facilities being heavily funded to try keep the few of us alive. I think two of the more scary yet cool viruses on this list in regards to gene mutation would have to be the hookworm parasite from Ninja Blade and the blacklight virus from Prototype. Both viruses make its way inside the host's body and genetically alter them. They become somewhat feral in nature, attacking humans and destroying their surroundings. I think the armies of the world would be called in for such a pandemic in this scenario. The only solution I can really think of is killing infected in hopes it doesn't spread, but I would imagine this results after trying to first capture and specifically examine subjects for possible cures. If this were real life, honestly, it would be a truly scary reality. I couldn't begin to imagine the heartbreak felt by loved ones being gunned down due to being infected with such contaminations. Zombie viruses. This is probably the most popular of the viruses on the list, but also the scariest in my opinion. Like, can you imagine zombies running at you, full force, to eat you alive, and you don't have a shotgun? And it's real life? And no save files or redos? Zombie viruses in video games is literally a whole video on its own, to be honest. There are so many zombie video games, but virus-wise, they can be somewhat listed and generalised under the one heading together. These include the T-virus and Los Plagas from Resident Evil, Iran virus in Dying Light, Freaker virus in Days Gone, Cordyceps brain infection in The Last of Us, Green flu in Left 4 Dead, Ampulex compressed giganteus in Dead Rising, HK virus in Dead Island, Black fever in State of Decay, and then just a generalised old zombie virus in DayZ and H1Z1. Zombie viruses in this instant is best to just be subcategorised under two headings: walkers and runners. Let's examine our survival rate in both instances. Obviously the list of games here all have varying ways that zombies can infect you, from biting to scratching, etc. Airborne symptoms are a more specialised case in some circumstances, and further, some video games have zombies who simply just try to murder you in some instances. To start with, I think our rate of survival is quite low overall. You can't expect everyday folk, especially elderly, to be able to combat such a horrible fate. I think catching this in its earliest stage would allow for it to be contained quite early, but also, knowing how countries wait for high death counts to take action, I would go as far to suggest that walkers could easily bring our population to less than 5,000 overnight. I don't think it would cause genocide, but rebuilding the population would require a cure to this illness in its most early stages. In the case of runner zombies, I think the opposite holds truth. I think human genocide is very likely even with a trained army group. On the other hand, there is a large chance that they contain it. I believe zombies are sitting ducks, whether they run or not, and trained armies could easily dispose them all in a matter of minutes. The problem exists in whether they are going to be jumped by surprise with this whole matter. Personally, I think governments would act too late, which puts a lot of us at a risk of death immediately. Fatal viruses. While viruses can be fatal, not all of them necessarily result in that. However, the following viruses would lead to worldwide scales of death from the get-go. The Rayfield plague from inside the world of Infamous sees the death of nearly the entire population of the city. The virus just seems to cause death from being in proximity. It's one of those viruses in video games that's too cool to have an actual proper description, so the game developers just marketed it as this fatal virus that kills on contact. Neat. Something like that spread worldwide just screams no man left alive. I don't think the government would have time to react to such an epidemic, and really we would just be hoping for a low enough death count to try rebuild civilization from the damage. To be honest, the same can be said for the rest of the viruses on this list. The Blight from Dragon Age, Grey Death from Des Ex, Mysterious Death from The Sims, and Crush Card virus from Yu-Gi-Oh! Okay, the last one I may have to explain, because you're probably wondering how a card can kill people. In the world of Yu-Gi-Oh!, when this card is activated, monsters with 1500 attack or more are destroyed from your opponent's card possession. Considering most cards have at least 1500 attack with even more cards ranging to say 3000 attack and beyond, That's at least 70% of the Earth's population in retrospect. Conclusions. I was going to add magical viruses to this list, but given the fact that there's a 100% chance that would never happen in a million years, I decided to not really include them. Which is funny, considering seconds ago I mentioned the magical card that could just kill us all. Maybe I'll just do it on a follow-up video, who knows. I did want to include one virus that wasn't discussed however. One that has taken the world by storm in both video game world and real life. And to be honest, it's probably the worst one of them all. Fortnite. That's right. In Plague Inc., you can spread Fortnite in less than a week. It kills the entire population. Okay, now I'm done with the jokes. In relation to all the previous mentioned viruses, only some of them could really even happen in the real world. At least with current scientific analysis, a lot seem impossible to achieve. And even if some form of strain were introduced, I have full belief in humanity for the better. You also have to consider how far into the future these possibilities occur. There's no knowing what illness we could cure 10 years down the road. Viruses are defeated by nature. Yes, they can be devastating, but there's an eventual payoff at the end of the road. We have individuals on this planet who are passionate about things like this. Doctors, nurses, scientists, the list goes on. It is these type of people who I believe, regardless of the circumstance, will shine a light in our darkest of times. They have been the heroes of both video game worlds and our real one, and I tip my fedora to them in our current day crisis. Anyways, I think that covers everything. Thank you for tuning into Hypotheticals. Before I go, I have to ask you guys what you think is the worst virus of video games, and do you think we could survive such tragedies? Be sure to leave a like if you found this video cured your boredom virus, and hit the bell to be kept up to date with all the latest theory videos in the future. But anyways, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Hey guys, sorry for the delay in uploading the latest video. I had this video recorded a year ago, but I had a severe stroke, and my speech and movement has been affected. I'm working on getting better, but my voice may sound different for the next videos. But I hope you all will understand and still support the channel. You guys mean the world to me, and I wish to make you more videos in the future. Thank you so much for your continued support. Until then, I wish you all the best and a Merry Christmas.